Hey, everybody. How's everybody doing? It is I, Hope Giselle, and my amazing, beautiful, awesome, inspiring, ridiculously beat today colleague, Miss Tatiana Williams.
Hello. Let me take that off. Hello, everyone. It's good to see you all. As again, Hope is just as beautiful. I don't know why she's playing it down. Um, we set it up for this, but I am glad that you all are here this evening. It's important that we have this conversation. You know, a lot of us in the community been doing a lot of protesting and all of that good stuff, and we kind of want to wrap it around and bring it back home full circle. So we want to give a little bit of education and some knowledge and get some of your feedback and also give you some of our feedback and kind of see and understand everyone's perspective because it's very important this year in 2020 that we show up like no other. So, you know, we'll have that conversation, good conversation, and respectful conversation. So I'm ready to get started. And, you know, we had a little bit of difficulties. Let's get this game going.
Let's do it. Let's do it. So I know Tati and myself were having a conversation earlier before we started, just around social barriers that discourage people from wanting to vote. Period. And I think that we both share the same sentiments, Tati. Correct me if I'm wrong, about the fact that it's still important. We know how difficult it can be right now, and we understand the attack that the administration has on us. We understand the social barriers. We understand that the idea of just the way that the social climate is around Black transgender people, with the focus on Black transgender women, and then if we move it on an outsourcing scale, we're talking about all trans people. We get it, but I think that it's important that we know the numbers and that we understand why this stuff is important. And it's not just the kids anymore. We were both talking about, how it's stretching out to some of the old heads too that are just discouraged from voting.
Right. Right. And I think that's important because and trust me, you know, as Hope and I was sharing, I get it and I understand you. But when you think about the way this community is set up and the climate that we're in today, we as older elders, if I would may say, we take a role in that and making sure that we continue to disseminate that information down to our youth, right? And sometimes when we are leading and we are not cognizant of the messages that we are sending to our youth, it puts us in a situation, you know. And I keep hearing this thing about this system, you know. I don't subscribe to this and I don't do this. That's your system. No, sweetheart, it's all of our system. And the fact of the matter is that we are here. We're going to be here and we have to figure out how to navigate the system. That's the key because we in the system.
Agreed. Agreed. Whether you like it
So
or not, you're a part of it. The man has got his foot on your neck. You're a part of it. You're here.
so we
Right.
want to see how we can help navigate this. So
Definitely. So we came up with some very detailed and specific numbers for you all. Some of these numbers have been gifted to us from the Williams Institute and various other groups that have done this research, but then the actual Trans March took the liberty to make sure that we had specific numbers for the Black trans community. So I wanted to hit y'all with some stats because the community loves numbers. Y'all like numbers because y'all like to be able to use numbers against people. So I'm just going to run some of these numbers down to you all, which is 5 out of 6 Black LGBTQ people are voting, which equates to about 58.8% of the overall LGBT Black vote. Now I want you all to be I need y'all to use like a very close scoped lens on listening to this, right? We are talking about the Black LGBT people who are voting. So as per the Williams Institute study that surveyed about 900,000 people, and the number might have gone up because this was a study from last year, but as it pertains to Black LGBT people, only 5 out of the 6 people who are Black were voting, but that number only equates to about 58.8% of the overall vote, and that's just in Black LGBT people, whereas the LGBT community as a whole makes up for about 14% of the vote of all people in the world who don't necessarily identify as LGBT or queer. So when we're talking about only 50% of the Black people voting out of the entire 14% of LGBT people who are voting, that breaks it down to a small 0.2 or 4% of people who are actually voting. So as a whole, there are 9 million LGBTQ people who are registered to vote. This does not mean that those 9 million people are actually voting. And so what we want you to understand is that when you all are seeing these numbers, when you all are looking at the stats and you're seeing like, oh, well, you know, there's all of these people that are registered to vote, understand that registering does not guarantee that those people will actually go to the polls or that they'll actually mail in their ballots. But what we've done is a study that shows you what happened if they will. Right? So that's 9 million LGBTQ people that are registered voters out of the entire US population of 328.2 million people. That is a lot of people. And we are only a speck in that number, right? So if all 9 million LGBTQ plus folks voted, that would equal to 2.74% of the national vote. So even if all of us LGBTQ folks got together, right, and this is not including the 58.8% of the Black people that are there, if all of us voted, our vote still only accounts for 2.74%. This means that all of us voting is going to be imperative because we cannot base allyship or family members caring or the people who have soft hearts for, you know, the issues caring to think that that's going to carry the weight for our votes. And what I'm seeing is that if people understand these numbers, then you understand exactly why the administration is getting away with murder as far as passing all of these bogus bills and making us feel like we're less than people. Because when you look at the numbers, we just do not hold enough weight in the electoral votes. We do not hold enough weight in the social votes. We don't hold enough weight in most of these counties that are red states. And so it's going to be imperative that not only do we register to vote, but that we actually vote. Because considering that our votes only add up to 2.74% as it pertains to the numbers from last year, I can only imagine what would happen if only 1.7 people out of that 2.7 people actually voted. And I want you all to take it seriously and understand that this is why the things that happen to the LGBT community as far as the laws are concerned are happening. Not enough of us are speaking up for ourselves. And we're kind of hanging on this idea, well, the system is corrupt, so I'm not going to vote. The system doesn't like me, so I'm not going to vote. Why should I vote for a system that isn't here for me, right? But if you don't vote at all, then what happens is that you lessen this number. And while 9 million people might seem like a lot, compared to another 328 million people, that is a speck of dirt in a mound of sand. And we need to be cognizant of that. And we're going to move on to the next slide so Tati can educate y'all on some more numbers.
But I want to before I go deep into this slide, I want us as a community to kind of like understand why voting is important and not just voting, you know, for the president like down ballot. You know, there's a lot of protections and there's a lot of things that we need as trans people, right? And there's a lot of services that when we are voting, depending on who's in office, when a lot of these policies and laws pass. So we want to make sure that we are taking care of each other. And it may not be in your mind, it may not be directly impacting you, but as a community and as a whole, it does impact us all. So we have to, we can't, I know we look at it from one way, but we have to look at it from a community respectful perspective, from a health perspective, from a safety perspective. You have to think about, you know, it's not about who's who and what's what, and we got everybody on this scale of who's this, who's that, he did this, she did that, he did this, he did that. We have to kind of like get out of that thought process and try to look at what's going to be best for us.
Correct.
Who would better represent you. It's almost like catching a bus to a location. It may not take you directly to your location, but if it gets you close to it. So we have to look at these things just a little bit different in the community. That's all I'm saying. I don't want to tell you what to do, but if I can just give you a different perspective of, you know, how you view it, maybe that would help us in some capacity if we can't get there. So 21% of LGBTQ plus adults not registered to vote. 0.6% of the US population is trans, which equals to 1.3 million trans adults in the USA. So When we think about that, when I'm looking at these numbers and what that equals for us, as Hope mentioned in the past, when you think about us being disproportionately impacted, yes, which is why, again, which is why we're doing this. And I mean, if anybody that knows Hope and I, both of us are straight shooters, right?
Yes.
Both let's
Yes.
let's let's be clear. Both of us are straight shooters and we don't do the bull and the BS. And so if you got her and me sitting here and this is what we're saying, it's got to be something to it. And I tell people when we're doing this work, we have to understand what it looks like when we're doing the work. And I tell people this work is very uncomfortable.
Correct.
It's not easy, and you have to be able to sit in uncomfortable spaces in order to get comfortable. And as I think it was Obama said it when he was doing the speech at the DNC, and when he made the comment of you, meaning people of today, you ain't got no business being upset when you think about what these other people went through prior to us getting here. So we can't take this privilege that we have in privilege for granted. So we have to keep that in mind. 100%. Go ahead.
I also want to flag that I want you all to look at these numbers once again. 1.3 million trans adults are in the US, right? And these are only the girls that we could document, the guys that we could document, the non-binary folk that we could document. But what we've documented so far is that as far as the LGBTQ plus population, there are 9 million people who identify that are not trans. And as we know in the community, the sad reality is that we cannot always count on the people within community to vote with the idea of the ways that trans people have been affected by some of these laws. So if there are only 1.3 million of us as documented by the state census, right, we all need to vote. Because that is 1.3 million people out of a vote of about 9 million people who probably might not necessarily care about trans rights because they've already gotten gay marriage or they've already gotten, the right to do X, Y, and Z. And we've seen this happen over and over and over again with the trans military ban. We've seen this happen when we did, get the right to gay marriage. A lot of the people who were at the forefront of those movements were trans people, trans women of color specifically. And then once they got their rights, trans people were left to fend for themselves. History has done it over and over again. And I want you all to be very cognizant of the fact that just because we're seeing millions behind these numbers, as it pertains to the scale of the national average of people who are voting, those numbers are a speck of dust in a mound of sand. And we need to be cognizant of that.
Mm-hmm. And follow that. 100% trans voters engagement would mean this what it would mean. 100% if we all engaged in the voting process. If all 1.3 million trans adults of the 9 million LGBTQ plus adults voted on November the 3rd equals 14.4% of the LGBTQ plus vote and 0.4% of the total US vote. So again, we got to be there because we need this and then some.
We have to be there.
We have to be there. We need this and then some. And I don't like to push things down people's throat. But then sometimes what I hear, Hope, is a lot of people, sometimes some people are not even educated as it relates to voting and what that looks like. There are some people that haven't had their rights restored, or, they've been incarcerated, or they don't understand that. And, and this is where organizations and community, myself, and other people that can help guide you in this process if you need assistance. And we're getting to the wire. So we have to, if you need to educate, even if you feel, because there's a lot of us trans people out there that don't feel comfortable in some of these spaces. And we don't want that to be a determining factor of you not showing up to the polls when you are able to mail in ballots, etc. There's some of us don't care. Whatever you feel, whatever you think, that's your business. I'm coming, I'm going to do this. But for some of those that don't feel safe in some of these spaces, there's ways and there's opportunities that you have in order to make this happen. And this is why we're doing this so early on, so you can take advantage of these opportunities that's in the community. Like the last day to register to vote is October the 5th. So we're here, what is the 8th? We're giving you a whole month we're giving you a whole month to get this out the way. The last day for your mail-in ballot to request a mail-in ballot, that's October the 24th. The last day to request a mail-in ballot. So if you feel uncomfortable, if you don't feel like, that's the thing for you, and if you just want to do it for the community, this is what I say. No vote is a vote. No vote is a vote. Especially,
one more time. One more time. They didn't hear you. One more time.
No vote is a vote.
Oh, okay.
So, so let's understand, you staying home and you saying that this doesn't impact you. I hear a lot of community members say to me, that has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with you.
Yes.
So when you come to me and say, I appreciate the work you're doing, and when you go to Hope and say, I appreciate what you're doing, yes, you appreciate what we are doing, but show us how you appreciate
that, right? Appreciate us by appreciating yourself.
Yeah, because we can't be out there, because we can't do this alone. We may be a piece of the puzzle, but we can't do this work alone. And that's what people have to understand. We need you in the process to make this happen. I always tell people in advocacy, numbers bring change. If you don't have no numbers, you don't get no change. So when we're looking at these numbers, we have to think about how we want to use these numbers to create change. And we have to start sometimes with ourselves, and changing some of our thought processes when we are in community with each other.
So now that we've given you all these numbers, and now that we've also given you all the dates, we want to challenge you to support the Trans March. The Trans March and the National Trans Visibility March will now be a full digital scale. We will have components that do give folks access to be on the ground. Should you decide that you want to travel to Washington, or should you already live in Washington, we will have those resources available to people. But we want to make sure that you all are utilizing the resources that we have that will be either on the website this evening, or things that we will have coming up. So that means that you have to make sure that you are on our YouTube, our Instagram, our Facebooks, all of those things to collect the information that we have coming forward. A lot of people want to know why we're doing this and why we're pushing it this year. People think that it's just about the idea of trans murders, but it's about the idea of making sure that trans people can live in this country freely, that trans people get the same opportunities, that trans people get to make the same mistakes, that trans people get to have the same livelihood as everyone else without dire consequences, simply because of our identities. Those things should not be tied in. Now, there are going to be a bunch of questions. Some of you are saying, well, Hope, my ID is not changed. My paperwork isn't finished. I don't know where to go to vote. Some of these places are not safe. I've been told in my city that if I show up, that they're going to cut my ID in half. It has happened. I know some of y'all are like, what? That's crazy. But it has happened. In efforts to keep trans people from voting in the past, some people have had their IDs cut in half at voting booths. It's been ridiculous. What we're going to do is make sure that we offer spaces to, one, have transportation to get to some of these polling places. And we're also figuring out ways in which to actually have people be able to create polling spaces that will be safe spaces for trans people. And the National Trans March will post those things on all of our national platforms. So if you want to stay informed, if you want to make sure that you do me and Tatiana proud, and you actually show up and you get these votes out and you're a part of this, not only should you vote, not only should you follow the page, not only should you be following the, what we have going on, but invite a friend, take a friend with you. Take a friend with you to the polls, tell somebody about the page, tell somebody about the information that you have here. All of the information and the numbers that you saw in the slides will be available on our Instagram page and our Facebook page, as well as our Twitter after this feed is over. And so will the dates for the end of mail-in ballots, as well as polling sites. We'll have all of that stuff up for you.
Yes, and we want to make sure that we have, even if there's some links I know, and I'll make sure that we get them on this page and some of our other platforms, that if you get to a polling site and you feel that you're being discriminated against, some information where you can call and you can contact someone. We want to make sure whatever it is that you need, you're going to be able to go there and click on these links and have somebody to support you, whatever state you're in, to make sure that we have all of the people that we need a part of this voting process. So we don't want you to be deterred by any way. And this is why we're doing it so early, so you can make sure those things that are important, because some people get to polling places and they may say that, your signature doesn't match. When we
Yes.
all get out now, our names changed and we do all this stuff we do,
Mhm.
for our own safety. But sometimes when we get in positions like voting, stuff pops up. So we
Right.
want to make sure that we have all of that covered. So we don't want any problems and making sure that everybody is counted in the process.
Exactly. So we have given you all the information that we have for now. We will be back with another way or another live session that will be a virtual resource guide for you all, for all of those people who are like, okay, I'm a vote. I know I'm going to vote. Now what? We want to have a space where people will actually be able to learn how to organize. So our next live, me and Tatiana will be sitting down with some policymakers and some in-house community leaders that you all will definitely know, love, and respect, to talk about ways to organize properly and make sure that you all are creating the change that you want to see and being a part of the change that you want to see in your very own communities. So stay tuned, stay posted. We love y'all, and we'll see y'all next time.
Absolutely, vote. Please vote.
Please vote. Go
Don't
vote.
tell me how good of the work I'm doing. Show me at the polls.
Bye, y'all.